Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I was going to film the mid-year freakout tag, which is a book tag that has all these questions about all the books that you've read so far this year. But as I sat down and I was going through the questions, I realized I kind of just wanted to talk about my favorite books that I've read this year. So that is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna share with you all of my favorite books, all of my 5 stars, the books that I've been loving this year, and then maybe I'll answer a few of the questions from the tag, but I really just wanna focus on the things that I have really loved. I have them in different categories, so we are gonna start with my favorite horror. I have 3 horror books that I read this year that I just loved so much. I have not stopped thinking about since I read them, and I'm really glad because last year was kind of a rough year with me in horror. Despite the fact that horror is one of my favorite genres and most of my all-time favorite books are horror, last year I read a lot of duds. Read a lot that I hated. Me and horror were on a little bit of a break, but the past couple months I've started getting back into it and I found some gems, some amazing ones. So first up I have The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This is a very short novella that really packed a punch. This is following a mermaid and a plague doctor who instantly when they meet they have a very strong connection and they go on a little journey together, and this journey leads them into this very creepy forest where there are these very creepy kids who are in some sort of cult that is run by these 3 surgeons who proclaim themselves to be gods. This book was so creepy and I have compared it to Over the Garden Wall, but creepier and scarier. It just has that vibe to it, and I just really loved these 2 characters individually. I loved their relationship with each other. It was amazing. The writing was great. I actually read it twice. That is how much I loved it. Then I have 2 books that I read very recently. I read these during Summerween. So we have The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This is very unhinged. This is following a girl whose parents just recently got divorced and her mom starts dating this new guy who is just horrible. He is a leech. He moves in with them and he's just a really bad dude. He's always watching her, staring at her very weirdly, and because of this she grows an obsession with his eyes. She can't stop thinking about his eyes. She's dreaming about his eyes. She's wondering what they would feel like. She's wondering what they might taste like, and this leads her to a very unhinged, dark, crazy hobby. She's just a girl with a hobby, okay? Maybe the hobby is collecting eyeballs. Who knows? I just was fascinated by this. I loved the main character and how unhinged she was. I loved the conversations around Korean American families, the different ways that men manipulate and prey on women, both aggressively and subtly. It was just amazing. I had a great time with this. It is a debut and I cannot wait to read more from this author. And then another unhinged woman, we have Mary, An Awakening in Terror by Nat Cassidy. This book was so good. I have not stopped thinking about this book since I finished it. And this is one of those books that when I finished, I was like, yeah, I loved it. It was 4.5 stars. But I keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And it's 5 stars. It's 5 stars now. I've upped my rating. But this is following a woman named Mary who is this middle-aged woman. She's reaching the ages of menopause and she has been having some very weird visions. Very weird things have been happening to her. She's been seeing crazy things and she goes to the doctor and is like, there's something wrong with me. And the doctor just doesn't believe her, won't listen to her, is very dismissive. And she ends up going back to her hometown. Being back in her hometown kind of ramps up these visions that she's having, and she realizes that she plays a very big part in this dark past that the town has. Oh my god, it was just so amazing. This is definitely one of the goriest horror books that I've read. There were some scenes in here that I had to take a beat. I had to take a walk, and I'm pretty good at handling gore and scary things. I had to put the book down and just take a minute to myself. I really love horror books that just dive very deeply into a character and the psychology of a specific person, and that is definitely what this did, and I loved Mary. Despite the fact that she is a little, a lot unhinged. I just loved her so much and I'm gonna be thinking about this book for a very long time. Okay, before we get into the next category, I want to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is FlexiSpot. They have sent me their new E6 standing desk and I am obsessed with it. It is so beautiful and it fits in my space so well. The bamboo top is just gorgeous and really gives this warm, cozy vibe to my office. The dual motors effortlessly lift lift up to 355 pounds. You can easily fit everything that you need onto this desk and it will be able to hold it all. It's also very stable and won't wobble, which is great for me because my floors in my office are actually very uneven, so that is a problem that I've had in the past with other desks. You can also program the Vibrant controls to have memory settings so that it will remember the perfect sitting and standing heights for you. And the model that I got, I specifically picked out the curved front, which makes it so comfy to be able to sit up very close to the desk. They offer a 15-year warranty on the desk frame and motor, plus 2 years for the control panel and electronics. There's also a lot of customization to the desk. You can pick out the color, the size, the stands. You can really customize it to fit your exact taste. So you can head over to the link in my description to check it out and upgrade your space. Okay, the next category that I have, and the biggest one, is romance, which, just like horror, the past year or so, I kind of had a rough time with romance. I think I'm rediscovering what I like in romance. So last year I really didn't have a lot of romance favorites, but in this quest to find what I love in romance today, I have found some really amazing, great ones that I love. So first up, we have You Again by Kate Goldbeck. This is loosely inspired by When Harry Met Sally, following two people who keep meeting at different points of their lives, and they kind of start off not liking each other. Their first couple interactions don't go well, and then they meet again when they're both at kind of the lowest points of their lives. They're both going through breakups and they're kind of at rock bottom, and they decide to help each other out through these rough periods and become friends, and then that friendship evolves into love and romance. And I just loved this book so much. It just has that perfect early 90s rom-com vibes, but obviously more modern. I really loved that we got to know these characters on an individual level before we get to know them in their romance, which I think is something that I find is missing a lot in romance books. I loved how complicated they were, how messy they were, how unapologetically messy they were. It's also queer. It was just amazing, a perfect romance to me. Then I have All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. This one was such a surprise to me. It's a very long book, and I read it in one sitting. I literally blacked out and just, I don't know, I became not a person. I was not a human anymore. I was just inside the book. This is a very slow burn romance following this woman who is returning to her hometown, and she rents out this man's garage apartment. And when she shows up, it turns out that he had no idea she was renting the apartment. His son rented it out to her. So he's not happy about it. He's very grumpy, but she has nowhere else to stay, so he lets her stay there for the time being. And very slowly, she's bringing his walls down. I loved this for very similar reasons that I loved You Again, because this is another romance where you really get to know the characters as individuals. There's a lot of side characters, a lot of plot going on outside of the romance. And I think that's something that I really like in romance books, because if I can't care about the characters as individuals, I'm just never gonna care about them as a couple. And it is so slow burn. By the time they finally get together, I was foaming at the mouth. I was I couldn't take it anymore. But it was, oh my god, it was so great. I just really I loved this one so much. And I finally understand the Mariana Zapata hype. Next, I have Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which was another surprise. This is a paranormal romance between a vampire and a werewolf. In this world, vampires and werewolves are complete enemies. In a political alliance, this vampire woman is married off to the werewolf alpha. They initially really hate each other. They don't want anything to do with each other. They're not happy that this marriage happened. This just was so much fun, and it gave me the feeling of the old school mass market paperback paranormal romances that were just so much fun. It also kind of I'm saying this as a compliment, it kind of felt like a CW show. It just reminded me of Vampire Diaries, or just all of those old CW shows that I loved. This is another book that I read twice. I read it, finished it immediately started it again. And it is probably one of my favorite paranormal romances that I've ever read. And I also now understand the Ali Hazelwood hype. The next one that I have is Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Emma R. Albin. This is a sapphic historical romance that was everything that I wanted. This is kind of like a parent trap situation where these two best friends are trying to set up their single parents with each other. They learned that one of them's mother and the other one's father had history in the past, and now they're both single and they're trying to set them up again. And as they're doing that, they end up realizing that they're also in love with each other. And it was just so cute. Like, I was rooting for these girls so much. It was everything that I wanted. Like, it had all of the Bridgerton vibes to it. Their chemistry was so good. It is definitely one of my favorite sapphic romances, and it was just so much fun. If you want something with Bridgerton vibes, but that is so gay, like so gay, this is it. And then my last favorite romance is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. This is another sapphic romance that I loved. This is one of those books that, like, I understand why maybe some people would not like this or it wouldn't work for some people. It worked for me. It was for me. She wrote this for me. This is like a cozy cottagecore fantasy sapphic romance. It has all of the like soft, sweet vibes, but I feel like it kind of reads more like a historical romance. It kind of has that like Regency vibe to it, where they go to balls and they ride around in like carriages. It just had that vibe to it. So this is following a girl who has recently become the Honey Witch. So she goes to this island to take up this new job of being the Honey Witch that was passed down to her from her grandmother. And on the island, she meets this girl who doesn't believe in magic. And she is determined to prove this girl wrong. And they sort of have like a little rival banter kind of relationship, but they're also very attracted to each other. They can't stop thinking about each other. They're constantly thinking about each other's lips and eyes and hair. And it's just, I just loved it so much. Like I said, it was just perfectly crafted for me and my taste and the things that I love. The next category that I have is Sci-Fi Fantasy, which surprisingly, this has not been my year for fantasy. I've enjoyed a lot of the fantasy that I've read this year, but only one has stood above the rest, and that is Iron Widow by Sharon J. Zhao. So this one is, I guess it's more sci-fi than fantasy. It's like sci-fi dystopian almost. This was one of the first books that I read this year, and it is still one of my favorites. The way that I would describe this is that it takes place in the future where aliens have come down and are attacking humans. And these aliens are like huge. They're huge and big. And in order to fight them, people have built these like giant battle ships that are in the forms of like monsters. So think like Pacific Rim. They're these big like mechanical armors, right? So people train to pilot them. Every like spaceship needs a man and a woman to pilot it. But the women always die. They always die in these ships. And the main character's sister was taken to pilot one of these ships and she ended up dying. And so the main character now wants revenge on the pilot who was in the ship with her and like sucked her life form out. So she now trains to become a pilot to get revenge. And it was just so, I loved, this is probably one of my favorite main characters of any of the books that I've read. I loved her so much. She is such a bad bitch. She does not care. She has a one-track mind. She's like, war going on, don't care. Politics, don't care. People dying, don't care. She just wanted revenge. And I love a woman who knows what she's about. Okay, my last category for favorites is a surprising one, and that is nonfiction, which I don't read nonfiction often, but when I do, it tends to hit really hard, and this one I just loved so much. It is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I need to get like an actual copy for myself, but this book was one of the most creatively written books I think I've ever read. It is a memoir chronicling a toxic relationship. It's about the author and her getting into her first same-sex relationship and kind of not really knowing that relationships with women can be abusive, and her just falling into this abusive relationship and not knowing how to get out of it. It's written in like little vignettes, and each one is to a different writing trope or theme. It's really hard to explain. It's one of those things you just like have to pick up the book and experience. I mean, I've never seen a book written like this, and it was so creative, and I was just captivated the entire time. I loved it. It is very heavy, especially since it is a real story, but I thought it was a very interesting topic to explore, abuse in queer relationships, because I don't think that's something that is portrayed a lot or talked about a lot. I feel like this would be a great nonfiction for people to pick up if you don't read a lot of nonfiction, because since it had all of these different styles, it really reads like not a memoir or nonfiction, and it was just so great. It really, really stuck with me. So those were my best books of the year. I guess I will answer just a few of the mid-year freakout questions. So what is my worst book of the year? My worst book of the year, 100% was American Queen by Sierra Simone. I read this for a video on Sarah's channel. I will link it if you want to go watch it. I spoiled the entire book and how horrible and unhinged and disgusting it was. But I was tortured doing that video. I would only put myself through that for Sarah, but that book was awful. My most disappointing book was sadly An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This was by no means the worst book that I read this year, but it was the most disappointing because she wrote my favorite book. I was looking forward to this so much, and maybe that was my downfall, was like setting myself up for it, but I was really let down with that book. It was just boring. It was just very boring. And then my biggest surprise is actually The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. It just surprised me because I'd obviously heard of Mistborn since I was on BookTube, and it was just always one of those books I never thought that I would be interested in. I never thought that I would like, and then I finally read it, and it wasn't at all what I was expected. I don't know, I feel like the way that people like pitch the book or talk about the book is not what I found the most interesting. So there was a lot of aspects to it that I was very surprised by, and I was like, oh, okay, I probably would have picked this up a long time ago if I knew this. But yeah, I thought it was really great. It was by no means like the best fantasy book that I've read, but I really, really loved it, and I'm so excited to continue the series. That is gonna be the end of this video. Let me know in the comments what is your favorite book that you've read this year. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and check out my Patreon where I post tons of exclusive content. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye! Oh my god, I'm too high. Get me down. Get me down.